afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Stephen Cowperthwaite, the Managing Director of Avis and Young Liverpool, and also Chair of the Liverpool MIPIM Steering Group. So it's my pleasure to have the second in our series of webinars. We had a really interesting one the other week looking at partnership investment and the ripple effect, and there was some really great positivity that came out of that. And, you know, we've seen the launch of the Liverpool Recovery Plan and many initiatives across the city. So housing is plainly something that is very, very important to all of us and a key element of that recovery side of things. So we've got a fantastic panel assembled this afternoon. I'm delighted that Melanie Leach, who is Chief Executive of BPF, has joined us today to moderate. And then we have Tony Reeves, Chief Executive of Liverpool City Council, Barry Wilson, Director at Shape Consulting Engineers, Chris Bowen, Managing Director at Taurus, and Darren Lawless, Development Director at Peel Land and Property. So with no further ado, Melanie, over to you to take this forward for us this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and good afternoon, everyone. And just to stress Stephen's request to you all that you feed in your questions and comments for the panelists as we go through, and we'll try and pick up as many as we can in the time available. So you can do that through the Q&A function and the chat function, which I'm sure you all know because you've all probably watched more webinars over the last few weeks than you ever thought you would have done or did do in the rest of your working lives, most likely. So I know you're all old hands, but please do take the opportunity because it is a fantastic panel that I have here. I would like to start the conversation. So we're going to talk about build, 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 and are we going to be building the same, differently, bigger, better? How are we all going to be living and working in the future? But to set the scene for that, Tony, I'm going to come to you first. So Liverpool submitted a £1.4 billion COVID recovery plan to the government, and I'm sure that Rishi Sunak's pen is poised over the cheque even as we speak. But why don't you just set the scene for us and just tell us sort of the bare bones of that plan and your vision for how we can build that better in Liverpool.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. I think the first thing to say is we submitted the plan to government about 3 weeks ago. It wasn't a plan for government, it's a plan for the city. And we fully intend with our partners to deliver the vast majority of what's in there. What we're offering government is the opportunity to invest in the acceleration of the delivery by supporting the things in there. I think it came from a growing sense of confidence before the crisis that Liverpool really was on the right path, particularly in terms of where the city centre economy was going, and the way that the sort of knowledge assets in the city were really starting to come together into a really strong, internationally significant ecosystem, particularly around health and life sciences, digital, material science, one or two other areas, all of which we think have got huge potential for growth going forwards. And what we didn't want to do was lose momentum. And whilst we focus really, really hard on the response part of the COVID crisis, we also started right from day one looking at recovery and thinking about economic recovery. And we had a working title of Project Greyhound because we really wanted to come out of the traps as quickly as possible. I know it's a bit cliched, but come out of the traps as quickly as we could post-crisis. And you know, we submitted that plan. We think it's the first in the country that got to government. It was a coherent plan based around innovation, around housing, around employment, critically important on employment given what's starting to unfold now, and around the visitor economy, which obviously is a really big part of Liverpool's economy post-2008 and European city of culture, and of course a sector in the economy that's been hit particularly hard with lots of businesses being closed down and only now is starting to reopen. I think the couple of things on that. Firstly, it wasn't a city council initiative. We might have started the process, but we engaged far and wide with the business community, with partners such as universities and others in putting the plan together. And we also jointly submitted it with our colleagues in the Combined Authority. The Combined Authority, or the City Region Economic Recovery Plan, is being submitted to government in the next week or so with our full support, and we've worked really hard to align the two plans, but ours went in the full knowledge that economic recoveries start in the areas of economies where you have the concentration of knowledge-based assets. That's almost always the case. And so getting the city centre element of the plan really focused and right, we felt was really important. And that was done jointly with our combined authority partners. What it means for us, we concentrated on a number of city centre schemes, but we're also really clear that the benefit of the growth plan needs to flow right across the city. That whole concept of inclusive growth is really important. And whilst housing is a really important element in there, and new build housing is a significant part of it with some really big projects that we're focusing on, so is retrofitting the existing housing stock and refurbing wherever possible, because new build, if you take a 10-year view, it will add, a few percentage points in a really buoyant market to the overall housing market. And in Liverpool, the existing housing stock is characterised by old, poor quality housing in a lot of our communities. That is a drag on economic recovery, is a drag in terms of health outcomes and productivity, and of course, critically important in today's environment, is a huge source of CO2 emissions. About 40% of our emissions in the city come from there. So when we looked at the housing scheme, we were very much looking to accelerate housing delivery, but also to tackle that sort of triple challenge of low income and fuel poverty, of improving housing quality, but also reducing emissions. And we felt that by positioning it in that way would make it particularly attractive for government support. In terms of employment, we absolutely called for a return to something like the Future Jobs Fund, which made a big difference in the last recession. And I'm really glad to see that the Chancellor announced last week that they haven't called it the Future Jobs Fund, but it's very much like that. And we've already had positive conversations with our city region partners and DWP about how we tailor a package that's going to work in the context of the city region's economy. I'm not saying we were directly responsible for that announcement, but there's no doubt we influenced it with the conversations we were having and the evidence we provided about the scale of the problem we were facing. And I think the final thing I'd say by way of introduction, because I'm sure others want to come in and we need to pick things up, is that this crisis is going to accelerate some of the trends that were already there. So, a lot of us are now getting used to working digitally. Does that mean that's the end of the office market in city centres? I absolutely don't think that's the case at all, but will accelerate the trend towards agile working and using different methods of working in positive ways that boost productivity, but also enable things to move forwards. We think that new build office accommodation in the city, which is very much needed, may mean that some of the older parts of the city will in time need to be repurposed. The shift in retailing that was taking place anyway may be accelerated. Do we think that's the end of high quality urban shopping? Absolutely not. But it may mean that the repurposing of some parts of the city centre where perhaps some of the poorer quality offer, and I don't mean low value, but poorer quality retail offer, might be accelerated as well. And one of the things we didn't want to do in our plan is try to second guess all of that. And so whilst we're really driving forward projects like Upper Central to really build the capacity in the knowledge quarter, where we need to create tens of thousands of jobs over coming years to build that inclusive growth, we're also recognizing that we need to just see how things play out and what the shakedown brings in terms of some parts of the city centre, in full knowledge that we'll be coming back to deal with those areas later. And in terms of the housing market, we also reckon that both new build and refurb, particularly building more aspirational housing in some of our poorer communities, will of course mean that ultimately that will accelerate the obsolescence of some parts of the housing market, which a problem we'll have to come back to later. But I think those are good problems to have, because you can see that sense of renewal coming through there. And 'twas ever thus that the public sector with partners need to step into that sort of space. And so whilst there's an immediate focus on the priorities in the plan, there's an immediate focus on housing, and it's great to see Barry on here, and different methods of construction I think are going to become increasingly important. It also means that we don't need to boil the ocean in one go. We can look at the evolution of the city over the coming years, see this crisis perhaps as a tipping point in some of those directions of travel, but have the confidence to hold our nerve and come back and sort these issues once we see the full picture starting to emerge. So that's the approach we've adopted. I think it's really ambitious, and it absolutely is a whole partnership approach to recovery.
Thank you very much, Tony. And one quick question for you. Where can people read the plan? Where can people find the plan?
Yeah, we've put a summary narrative out on the council's website, etc. The full plan was 178 pages with full business cases and letters of support from a range of business partners, some of whom are engaged in this event today. Some of that has got commercially confidential information, and so we won't be releasing that publicly, but the summary version is available on the council's website. We're very happy for all the people that joined the call to send a link to that afterwards, if that's helpful.
Great, thank you very much. Darren, I'm going to come to you next, because sort of the themes that Tony touched on around productivity and economic growth and some of those things are very much, I think, part of Peel's DNA. So I'll bring you in to talk about that first, and then we'll come on to talk about housing and innovation, and I'll bring the other panelists in. But over to you next, if I may.
Thank you, Melanie. Well, first and foremost, in terms of the introduction that Tony gave, both myself and a number of other development organisations were engaged by Tony in the council very early on in the crisis to see where we could actively work together and promote the best interests of Liverpool to see it through this recovery at the earliest opportunity. So I'd just like to confirm our wholehearted support for the work that the council have been doing in those efforts. With regards to Peel, we're probably uniquely placed because of our land holdings within the region, both within Liverpool itself, the city centre, but also across the water at Wirral, our investments with the ports and the airports, that it'll come as no surprise to you that we are desperately keen to do everything that we can to ensure that this region and the Northwest as a whole, which is our heartland, sees through this crisis and comes out better. The initiatives that have been pursued, particularly by the government in terms of Build Back Better, are music to our ears in terms of unlocking the full potential of not only our assets, but the region as a whole. From a personal point of view, on behalf of Liverpool Waters, we've worked for many, many years to come up with a coherent master plan that will unlock a significant area of real estate that unfortunately has been inaccessible and, let's be honest, hasn't been particularly desirable, particularly to the north because of its industrial heritage. And one of the key aspects of that has always been to create an environment that is welcoming to the public, both in terms of accessibility and security. So the linkages with the remaining parts of the city are critical to us in terms of footpath, cycleways, and proper street lighting, etc. But also giving people a reason to want to be there, want to invest, and want to live there and work there. So an awful lot of work has been undertaken in terms of producing a public realm strategy, and that's been undertaken by consultants across a range of disciplines from within the city centre. That's something else that we also are always keen to do, work with local suppliers, because they're very, very passionate about the areas that they're working in for good purpose. What we're trying to do through the current crisis and beyond is effectively build on the momentum that we already had pre the events of early March. And I'm pleased to say that, notwithstanding the challenges, that life has continued. Construction work has been, with the appropriate safeguards, been allowed to continue. We handed over 100 apartments to Regenda for a new vehicle that they've got, Plaza 1821 and Princess Dock. And people are actually moving into the accommodation as we speak. The interest has been tremendous. And yes, it's been a challenge, but we've got there. We also have other construction activity ongoing with other partners with Moda, Lexington Tower directly adjacent. Planning applications currently with the Planning Authority for the delivery of a scheme with Your Housing for 274 apartments. And that's just scratching the surface. You know, we have the potential to deliver over 9,000 homes, but focusing on the Build Back Better, we've been working with colleagues in Peel Energy. We've created a special purpose vehicle, Mersey Heat, which will be providing a district heat network that will be able and capable of serving not only those homes, but existing offices, both within Liverpool Waters, which covers just over 60 hectares. So it's a very significant piece of real estate. But we also want to provide those benefits and those linkages to other users. So we're actually working with occupiers and owners on buildings outside of our estate. That work has been continuing, and I'm pleased to say that we're making really, really good progress on that, with the intention to create a permanent energy centre on Great Howard Street, just opposite the Titanic. And again, we're in detailed discussions with those operators to enable them to tap into that. We want to create the benefits of those facilities for 10 streets, which is another regeneration project. In terms of flexible working, I think that the current events have proven that's possible. I personally have been doing that very successfully along with all my colleagues within Peel. And it's amazing how much more work has been capable of being done without the need to be travelling. But there's always going to be a need for those personal relationships and interactions. And within our existing estate, I'm pleased to say that, again, with all the appropriate safety checks and balances in terms of distancing, appropriate screening, etc., that a lot of our occupiers, albeit on a reduced basis, are returning back to their offices. We have 3 office buildings that accommodate 4,000 or 5,000 people, and 3 of them, one of them's been fully occupied throughout the crisis because of the work that they've been doing on behalf of the Secretary of State and others. So normality is returning, but we need to adapt and make changes that are going to make people feel safe in the immediate future, but also give people the benefits that they've really come to appreciate. And I myself count myself in that as well, in terms of public open space, the opportunity to go and exercise in an environment that isn't just a gym. We have those facilities on site and with some of our partners in terms of hotels, etc. But people want the opportunity to capitalise and move about freely and safely. So we've got a fantastic opportunity being on the waterfront. We're really, really keen to connect the waterfront from north to south. A huge shovel-ready project, namely Everton, is waiting in the wings patiently for it to go through the due process in terms of planning determination. But if any government ever wanted an opportunity to unlock, almost £1 billion worth of investment to employ 15,000 people, I think that probably should be at the top of the list. But again, it's all about having the health and well-being of people. So in terms of education, in terms of health and well-being, those aspects can be accommodated as well. So as I said before, we're in a very privileged position and opportunity to help both the City Council and the combined authority to build on the work that's been done recently and continue to work with other partners, because we can't undertake a project of this scale on our own basis. We don't have a desire to do that. We want to welcome in other investors, other developers. We also want to create a healthy housing mix. So, for example, we have a number of plots within the scheme that are low density, that are more capable and flexible for families and start homes, etc. And we're working with some very capable organisations, which may include an element of modular construction as well. We're also keen to tackle the housing crisis in terms of the delivery of homes. So we are looking at high-rise development as well. But that really puts a focus on the need for communal spaces in a safe environment, accessibility to secure cycle storage and the like. So we're trying to creatively come up with answers to those challenges, and I believe that we're meeting them at the moment.
Right. Thank you very much, Darren. Chris, moving on to you then. Let's talk about housing and making sure that people have decent homes, because I think COVID's been a very human crisis and story, I think, and home is at the heart, I think, isn't it, for all of us as individuals. So let's talk some more about housing.
Yeah, most definitely. I think, again, just adding to what Tony and Darren have said about the economic recovery, you know, our sector has got a big part to play there. We're already committed to building 7,000 homes across the city region in the next 5 years. And I think a lot of, again, what Tony's saying is it's about acceleration and bringing things forward quicker. We've got a vast amount of housing stock that could be subject to retrofitting. We can build more homes. And I think, again, the thing for us is about building the right homes in the right places. That, you know, we talk about the areas of the city where interventions are needed and where markets work. You know, places around Anfield, Everton, Kirkdale, Clubmoor, across Liverpool. There's huge demand in places like that, but taking that strategic approach to kind of land opportunities is important. I think that, again, town centres across the city region, I think, are something that's important to us. So, yeah, I just think, moving on from the kind of economic recovery debate, what does the future look like? I think it's quite important. So it's going to change, I think, undoubtedly, that we're going to see a far bigger impact on an importance on placemaking, about the places that we want to try to build. We've got some projects in the pipeline at the moment that will set out some of these new principles that we're trying to adopt. Our public consultation on the Liverpool Football Club's training ground at Melwood in West Derby starts today. It's a dedicated website. I'd urge people to go and have a look at that. We've put a planning application in for 200 units on Great Howard Street next to the canal by the Titanic. Again, there's new principles there about what do we want to see our homes and our neighbourhoods look like in the future. And I think in terms of what's going to be different, how we live, how we use our homes is going to be different. What we value about not just our properties, but the places that we live is changing, you know, and what we expect, expectations are changing. I think for too long we've been building bedrooms. We build 2-bed houses for 4 people and 3-bed houses for 5 people. We're not building flexible, kind of functional homes that have got a purpose according to what the activities are for the people that live in it. So I think, again, you know, space standards are going to be massively important. We're quite well regulated on that, but it's the flexibility of that, not just the kind of maximisation of occupancy within those. And there's a few issues, I think, that have come out when we do think about what post-COVID standards of housing should be. Home working is obviously the obvious one that springs to mind, agile working, but it's having the right places to do that. You know, I think working off an ironing board is the worst home working solution I've heard from a colleague in the last 3 months. And if somebody can beat that, then put it on the chat, because I think that's just, our homes are just not geared up for the way that we are probably going to carry on working to a large extent of our working week like this. I think the other things around, particularly social isolation, it's been massive, I think, as an issue. People's mental well-being, you know, and it isn't just applying to people that live on their own in housing. I think equally applies to people in apartments, and to some extent also to the design of the way that apartment blocks for all ages are built, with corridors, and you're behind your front door, no balconies, very little access to your own defensible open space and fresh air. And I think also having that kind of access to open space, whether it's your back gardens or whether it's the public realm around you, is important. The other point really is about what I think it's taught us is a bit of a revitalised sense of community and pride, and a bit more belonging about our neighbourhoods and our places that we live in. You know, I think we're looking out for our neighbours more. Street parties, claps for the NHS. I've seen people living in our road that I didn't know lived here, and I've lived here 15 years. We're looking out for each other, and things like that I think are important, because I think it's the message really that's got lost, I think, about how we live. So you know, there's a lot for us to aim for, but if we're aiming for a new post-COVID standard of living, then Liverpool should be where we want to do this. You know, with Melwood, Liverpool Waters, Stonebridge, all the sites that we know are coming forward. You know, the bigger sites, the strategic approach enables you to create those places. So multi-generational living, homes you can work from, local places that you could go and work from without having to commute far, I think is important. And again, creating that movement around that people are going to see each other, and they're going to share experiences, not just you're living in a house or living in a flat and you've got no connection with that centre around you. It's almost a kind of, you know, a local approach to creating these better places. I think just in terms of sustainability, I think transport is the big one for me. I think car usage, public transport, commuting, you know, massive kind of challenges. And I do think things will change on that front. And we're looking at all sorts of different solutions now around electric pool cars and various other things. And I think I would throw a challenge to planners around that we need flexibility if we're going to introduce things like that. If we do expect and want people to live more sustainably, then I think we do need to look at some of the standards that we have to meet around car park spaces, this, that, and the other, and things like that. So really, and I'd finally say that, you know, it is about us being bold. I think this is now the time for us to grasp the nettle and be ambitious of what we want to do. And I think, you know, in particular at Taurus, we've got, I can think of 12 schemes of over 100 units where we can take a really kind of thoughtful, ambitious approach to placemaking that, you know, I would think collaboration and working together means we can start to do that a lot more across the city too.
Thanks very much, Chris. And last but absolutely by no means least, over to you, Barry. So I've heard a number of words which I think ought to be music to your ears, whether it's around building quickly, whether it's around repurposing, reimagining buildings, around being more flexible. I mean, these are all music to your ears, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've, across our group of companies, we've hopefully got a part to play in a lot of that, from, you know, the structural engineering side and delivering schemes for, you know, for Taurus and the council. That's great to hear as well. And we've got obviously Shape Land and Property, which we're doing our own developments. We're looking across sites, you know, varying in size, looking to deliver, you know, new homes. And I echo what Chris was saying there. We are trying to, you know, make places rather than just houses, I suppose. I think creating places where people want to live with the outside space and the way people are living now. I think I fully agree with what Chris said as well on the working from home will become sort of the norm. I think the flexible working hours will definitely become the norm. And you know, across our companies, we've already adopted that really. So, you know, people will continue to work from home. And I think these sort of platforms like your Zooms and your Teams meetings have shown that is possible. It's still possible to stay in contact and stay close to your clients as well. But yeah, you know, obviously the one of our companies we launched last year at MIPIM was Space Modular, which, you know, is it's gone from strength to strength over the past 12 months. And we stated then that we believe that to assist in the housing crisis and enable the targets of sort of 300,000 houses a year to be delivered, the MMC needs to be embraced. We've just recently delivered our first development, which actually went with Liverpool Foundations, so they are now you know, sold and being lived in, which is fantastic news. And we spoke, you know, about the sustainability of these units, and we said how you know, how cost effective it was, how energy efficient it was, and, you know, the smart technology that we put into the homes. We've now got the proof sort of to back that up, which is, I think, what you need, because you have got to get past that perception of prefabbed houses, I suppose. But, you know, we're very keen to be a part of what Tony and Chris and also Darren are saying there. If we can be involved on a modular basis or even assist on the delivery and the development side, that's what we're keen to do. The houses we're delivering now, the 30% above building regs requirements for air tightness, 30% above for acoustic requirements. And as I say, with the smart tech and the energy efficient products we put in these houses, they're now actually net zero. Effectively, they are producing more energy than what they actually use. So, you know, it all feeds in with what everyone's been saying, that we need to deliver homes, we need to deliver them fast. And, you know, our the industry we're in construction has a big part to play in the recovery. I think one of our main goals for the next 12-18 months is to look for the factory in the UK. Our factories abroad at the moment, and the units are shipped in. But you know, a factory in the UK is something we're very keen on. We're speaking to some authority and the council. We've had some very positive conversations with Chris also. So you know, we're very keen to be a part of that, and you know, sustainability and you know, home working is something that we've taken very seriously, and you know, we're looking to deliver the homes that people can work in and working comfortably. As Chris said, the homes you've got at the moment sometimes aren't the best. It's a converted bedroom or a back room for your office. So I think the way people are now going to work it needs to be key, and making sure they're actually places where people want to live, you know, with the outside space, etc.
Thank you very much. And let me stick with that theme then around, I think all the panelists are agreeing that we're likely to see people working from home more in the future, where they can, in a sort of probably in a blended way, with some time in an office and some time from home. So let's just stick with that theme of how a home would need to look different, so you don't have to do that off your ironing board or off the kitchen, or compete with your teenage sons for the Wi-Fi in quite a limited supply. Chris, come back to you. I mean, how do you, are you going so far as to think you need to fundamentally look again at the design of the homes that you're building, with the insights we now have? I mean, is it actually forcing you to change the homes that you build, do you think?
I do think it will, yeah, I do think it will. I think, I did say that, you know, we tend to build houses based on numbers of bedrooms, rather than see that, you know, not necessarily creating extra rooms for people to work from, but just space within homes that can be flexible, and you can do more than just, you know, what you might have planned with. I think particularly, we do a lot of homes for shared ownership and for rent to buy, and we've managed to keep our sales program going over the last few months. And I think particularly around with affordable home ownership, then, you know, there's very often there that people will, I think, make a conscious decision to look to buy something that has got that flexible space in that, puts us apart, I think, from what a traditional kind of house builder might be looking to build. I do think that generally in that sector of the market, design layouts will change. We've got a range of standard house types at the moment that we're looking at, that bringing in and embedding, but you know, we do need to rethink there, I think, around some of the uses of those spaces. Size-wise, I think, you know, what is built is acceptable. I think it's where it's got the potential to do more than one thing, really, for how we live. But I do expect that, I think there'll be a far bigger consideration for people when they look at what they move into in future, when they make choices. And why not in social housing? Do we have studies and places for us to work from? It shouldn't just be dictated around trying to meet housing need all the time.
Yeah. So there's a question for you. If the design layouts change to incorporate home working, will the cost potentially increase? So how do we make sure that it's not just yet another thing that those who can afford it can pay a premium for and the rest don't get it?
Well, I see that Bill Baldwin's made that comment. So, you know, given that he's one of our cost consultants, then I would expect Bill to work with us to try and keep these costs down. I don't think that good design and good standard should cost more. We do have to think about construction methods in that, you know, it's all variable, isn't it? That, you know, the bulk of the cost of the unknowns of development tend to be underground. But if we can get some certainty on how we build above the ground, so with standards, you know, standard types that we know are deliverable. We work a lot with SMEs. We've got in-house contractor that builds with us. As much as we can place certainty on, then I think it's important that we do that. And I would hope that it isn't going to cost us more. And again, you know, what Barry said earlier, if we could look at manufacturing and off-site construction as a financially efficient way of doing this, then there's no reason why it should cost any more.
Thank you. And Darren, sort of helicoptering out the same question, but slightly helicoptered out to you, and then I'm going to come out even further to Tony. So thinking about some of the trends that we've been talking about in terms of potentially more agile working, the changing nature of city centres, Do you think, I mean, do you think those changes are potentially so profound that you need to look again at master planning sites, at your whole vision for an area? I mean, are we at that stage of that implication that you need to actually just go back to the drawing board and think, actually, with what we now know about how people are likely to be living in the future, we just need to rethink this plan?
I think some of those thoughts and ideas were already being implemented to greater or large degree, particularly the idea of being able to have a more flexible approach to working and the environment that you undertake that, because you know, work takes up a large part of a person's life, but people, if they have the opportunity, want to try and strike a better balance with their family and their private life as well. So the idea of being able to work from home was always desirable, but there wasn't necessarily the huge level of support to do that, either from employers or from other business contacts. And the last few months has shown that providing people have got access to a laptop and have got the availability to use the applications that are there, it's perfectly feasible. The issues therefore are, you know, what is the environment that you're working from, particularly if you have a family. You know, the challenges of potentially working from home whilst your partner is doing so, or indeed your children are being to school from home, is going to be a challenge, whether that's bandwidth, whether that's actually having quiet spaces within those home environments. So I think from a design point of view, the actual purposing of space needs to be flexible to accommodate that. You know, through one of our own house building divisions at Northstone, we're actually looking at the proverbial garden shed that can be repurposed and very easily fitted out for a home office working environment if you want that degree of separation from the family life. In terms of ripping up the rule book and starting again, I think it's just given everybody a really clear focus on what is important. The availability to be able to have access to open space. If you want to just, you know, go and grab 5 minutes, 10 minutes for a bit of fresh air, a bit of exercise, that's not always been possible in, for example, an office environment. People are a lot more acutely aware of the importance of well-being. So whether that's having a bicycle hub that's secure, gives people the opportunity to change, etc., before going into the working environment. Working environments themselves are going to have to be a lot more flexible. So the space that's provided per employee is probably going to grow as a result of social distancing. But people will be using those spaces a lot more agile. So in terms of hot desking, etc. From Peel's perspective, we've always tried to develop master plans that have a degree of flexibility in them, because of the scale of the projects we're talking about. You know, the development itself is probably going to be 20, 30 years in delivery. So we don't have a one size fits all. But what we do is want to implement great design and really forward thinking measures, whether that's accessibility for pedestrians, cyclists, abilities to be able to exercise, get clean, fresh air, and live and operate responsibly. Those are all embedded into our ethos going forward. What I'm really pleased to see is there's an acknowledgement that those have key benefits, and also in terms of sustainable use of energy. I agree that the idea of car parking spaces, the availability of cars, is going to probably be less important. We're seeing that with some of our delivery partners in terms of car sharing schemes and accessibility to those. People want the services as locally as possible because they don't want to have to travel if they can avoid it. So again, that needs to be built into the service provision. So the ability to go and eat, drink, meet other people, and the balance is going to be striking a happy, healthy, safe environment. Liverpool has got a very, very distinct advantage on a lot of its competitors in that we're on the waterfront. You know, we get plenty of clean, fresh air across the North Sea and from the Atlantic. Sometimes it's a little too windy, but I don't think people will be complaining about that perhaps as much as they used to. But we've got some incredible public open spaces already, and we need to build on those. I think that's why it's important that we get behind the council's ambitions to come up with high quality public realm and ability to maintain and deliver that. I think that's going to be very, very important going forward.
Thank you. And Tony, the same question to you. I mean, are the changes that we think will stay with us whenever coronavirus is described as over, which I mean is still a kind of slightly moot question, isn't it? But I mean, do you think these changes are so profound that both the city and the region will need to sort of rethink and reimagine the vision beyond what's in the recovery plan? And I suppose I'm thinking in particular one of the questions that was sort of posed as part of setting this seminar up around whether people will need to live as close to the city centre as they did, and whether you've now effectively got a broader catchment area for employment, with people not coming into an office every day, whether there are opportunities there, what that means in terms of how you define your sort of hinterlands and your particular designated areas for different types of activity, those kind of things.
Okay, I think it's a really, really interesting question, Melanie, and you can look at it through a range of different lenses in a way. One of the, if you look at our economic strengths and the things that we will really build growth on, that's particularly around health and life sciences and digital and material science, and there's some real synergies between Liverpool and Manchester there. And I think that, and when we said this in the economic recovery plan, that the deal that we did with Bruntwood SciTech during the crisis, where they've invested in Liverpool Science Parks and come in as a 25% equity partner in what's now called Scientech with the two universities and the council, really strengthens that link between Knowledge Quarter Liverpool, Alderley Park and Oxford Road Corridor Manchester. And I think increasingly we'll see the Northwest as the ecosystem around health and life sciences. And you know, if you look at it through a Chinese or a North American lens, it's one place, quite frankly, with two great identities and two, you know, international brands like no other outside London and England, quite frankly. So there's a lot to build on there. But I think those synergies and symbiotic relationships become increasingly important. And actually, with not everybody having to come to work 5 days a week and relying on a pretty archaic public transport system, I think that opens up a lot of possibilities. But I also think that, you know, part of the fundamental question is what role for cities like Liverpool and city centres like Liverpool. And I think if we're bold and if we take the really good lessons from this crisis and accelerate the things that were already happening before and play to our strengths, we can really differentiate our city from other places. So if you take our initiative, Liverpool Without Walls, how we, before government plans were moving in that direction, how we reimagined the role of our streets, and we've closed a number of streets in the city centre. At the moment, that's temporary. I suspect that's going to become permanent if it works on Castle Street and Bowles Street, and we're now looking at Lark Lane, potential for Hope Street, etc., where we can create a real European cafe-style culture, which certainly at this time of the year works really, really well in a beautiful environment, because Liverpool is a beautiful city. As has already been said by Darren, we've got a great waterfront and beautiful public spaces here. So if we get the quality right, the quality of access, the quality of the working environment, the quality of the experience, and the quality of the sort of the spaces, and the quality to come in, the quality experience, people enjoying the city, I think we can absolutely differentiate ourselves. Couple that with more agile working, with more symbiotic links between us and Manchester and other places as part of that, and we build on our real strengths. At the moment, one of our great strengths through the School of Tropical Medicine, the university, is around infection control. You know, Bill Gates doesn't invest $400 million everywhere. He's come here for a purpose with that investment because of the strengths that we have. And if we play to those strengths, but we're bold enough to reimagine the role of the city and do that in a very inclusive way, I think we can create something really special. But if we're a cookie cutter place that is just bog standard, then I think people will be encouraged to work from home. I have to say, I hated working from home during the crisis. On the 1 or 2 days a week that I did do, I was coming into Liverpool because I love coming into Liverpool and I love coming to work. And I know I've seen, you know, some colleagues feel a bit of trepidation as we started to bring our staff back in. Others have been absolutely just bouncing coming in through the door, and we all react differently. And of course, if we want to attract and retain the best talent, we need to have flexible approaches in place, because talent is absolutely key to growing our organizations and building the productive city that we absolutely want to be. So I think there's a range of different things there, and I think that it is going to be different. I absolutely don't accept that's the end of the city centre. I think there's a great opportunity for us to differentiate ourselves. But the watchword, and I've said this throughout the time I've been in Liverpool, build on the quality that's already there, but it is absolutely about delivering quality of experience, quality of place, quality of working environment, and critically quality of access to those opportunities as well.
Thanks, Tony. That's really helpful. I'm going to shift the focus now. We've not got too long left. So I'm going to try and fit in the questions that are coming through if I can, and there's probably time for at least one more question if you've got one you'd like to ask the panel. This one's around technology. Barry, you talked a little bit about technology going into homes earlier on, but what are the technologies that are going to help us deliver both that quality, that better lived experience, but also the cost savings that we're going to need to roll this out at scale and make homes affordable to everyone? So we've got, apart from energy and sustainability, you're not allowed either of those. What else, Mrs. Lincoln? What else will technology deliver, and other examples that you can give? Come to you first.
I think that the technology that we're looking at within our units, obviously it does all come back to saving money, but making sure that the quality is there. We need to make sure, obviously, as Chris was saying earlier, these homes need to be affordable as well. We're looking at all different types of things, for heating the houses, efficient, and it's just about including these new technologies which enhance the homes that we've got and enhance the new homes to facilitate what we were talking about earlier about how the use will change, and people will most likely spend more time in the homes and work from home. Maybe not so much Tony, he's preferred to be in the office, but yeah, it's and I fully understand that with kids as well. But it ranges really. It all comes back for us in terms of the modular side of the build. I mean, we're delivering traditional houses as well through the development arm that we've got, but the modular side is something that we are keen to push, because we think it is key to delivering the new homes, the high quality homes, at the speed we need to. So it all comes down to energy efficiency, things like that, and the fact that these houses are net zero. You're talking about, you could have these homes on the same estate, varying ages, varying incomes, but they're all going to get the same benefits from that, and allow people to live in these high quality houses. But the bills, etc., are going to be much lower. In some cases, they can actually make money back from selling excess energy back to the grid. But yeah, it just comes back to flexible living, I suppose, with us, and these units are so flexible. And as I say, the varying technology we put in it is going to be second to none going forward. Everything can be controlled from various iPads and etc. within these units. And we're keen to push that on. As I say, we've had some very positive conversations with Chris and also Tony about delivering units around the city region, and also we're very keen to put the factory in the northwest if that is possible. So we're speaking to a couple of partners at the moment, and that will only bring the technology further. It will only allow us to advance it further if we've got the factory in the UK for what we need, and make it more bespoke for the UK market again, pushing things forward.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, you're probably closest to the housing customer of our panel. What do they want tech to do for them?
Well, it'll be up there now with everything on it, the quality of the Wi-Fi and other the digital connectivity. We'll be looking at electric charging points and all those kind of issues. I think one thing technology can help us with massively is isolation, and keeping people in touch with each other. We've got extra care schemes. We've got 4 on the go all over the city region at the moment. Just finished one in Kirby, and I think again we've put stuff into the development there where you can call your neighbours and speak to them through means such as this. I think it's a fantastic way not just to control how you use your home and turn your lights on from 20 miles away and turn your heating up and down while you're on the other side of the world. But to me, it's about people keeping in touch. And I think that's a huge part of what I think technology can do. can do for us. So, you know, homes are built for people, aren't they? It's people that, you know, we don't necessarily always build homes exactly to suit what we want and what we can do with them. And I just think, particularly when Tony talked about the kind of, you know, the lifestyle of the city centre and the integration with health and life sciences and so on. We've got a development scheme on Edge Lane, which is half a mile away from the Knowledge Quarter now, 140 homes for shared ownership and rent to buy. We've got 900 people that want to live there. Huge employment in the Knowledge Quarter amongst those applications and those people who are interested. So there is most definitely some connection there, I think, between places and where people work and where they want to be able to get to easily with where they live. So I think the quality of it, again, you know, we're talking about commuting less, but that kind of almost assumes that we live a fair distance away from where our office might be. I think you might actually see a move for people who want to live on the kind of fringes of the city, because it is so well connected, and the offer, as Tony said, around the lifestyle. And when you do need to get into your office space, it can be so much more accessible than it has been in the past, and where we've been building, you know, building the right places again, close to where the growth is.
Thank you. And could you perhaps just pick up the question that's just come in on the chat too, just to comment on how we use technology and connectivity in how we provide that in deprived areas, and the comments coming particularly from the question of, I think, education, where we've seen, you know, in deprived areas and lowest income families, you know, they struggle to have access to the online learning that others have had for all sorts of reasons. So how do we imagine technology and connectivity and those kind of things that you were talking about in a work context? How do we imagine that for families and for education and for all of the other things that, you know, a lot of us middle class people on this call just take for granted as part of our lifestyle?
Oh yeah, it's such an important issue, isn't it, around educational inequality and the impact of, again, who's going to suffer most from this crisis, but also, you know, who will benefit from the recovery. It is that inclusive growth agenda, isn't it? But I think particularly around young people and people in education, you know, we've got a charity, a foundation that amongst its mission is all about, you know, dealing with financial inclusion, digital inclusion, employment, enterprise, you know, giving people that aspiration. And I think, again, we've got to look at the means of what we offer as social housing providers, that, you know, we don't want to provide homes for people who are of little chance of kind of making the most of their lives. So again, if we do need to work with, I don't know, organizations to make people more able to have hardware and have the proper Wi-Fi that's affordable, then, you know, we've got to do everything for them. Most people can operate off a smartphone, but, you know, you read endless stories of people where they might have 4 or 5 children and they're trying to homeschool off a single device, you know. And I think it's, again, it's for the education sector, but also the responsibility of landlords like ourselves to do more for our tenants there, to help them, but also directly intervene and help provide.
Thank you. We're about to wrap up. I'm going to give the last word to Tony in a minute to pick up on that theme, and indeed any other closing comments he wants to make. I'm going to use Chairman's privilege to ask Barry if he can respond on the chat function to the question around savings of modular housing and Amendment C, because we're not going to get a chance to discuss that on the call, but if you wouldn't mind picking that up on the chat function whilst I hand over to Tony for the last word on the seminar.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. I think it's been really, really interesting, and all the contributions have been great. I think the last one that Chris has just been picking up on about children in disadvantaged areas is absolutely critical. And one of the things, alongside the economic recovery plan, we're just finalising a city plan with all of our partners, looking at how we look holistically at these issues and really engage our communities in tackling some of these really deep-seated issues. And quite frankly, if we don't, then in 30 or 40 years' time, people like us will be in a meeting like this, virtually or otherwise, discussing the same communities and, quite frankly, different generations of the same families that we'd be discussing now, because this top-down siloed state with a fragmented approach to public policy hasn't worked for those families. And actually what we've seen is that gap between people who are left behind and the rest growing over recent years, despite obviously we've had difficulties in public funding the last few years, but you can see that trend over 20-30 years opening up. And it requires a fundamentally different approach, and we need to find the way to give people the tools to take control of their own lives, and technology is a really important part of that. And actually, yes, this is a role for the public sector, but when we've talked to responsible employers and a range of private sector partners in the city, they all recognize that it's in all of our interests, because what this does is it creates a really significant productivity gap. And if we don't holistically deal with the people issues as well as the built environment issues as we're regenerating the city, and create the skills, create the access to opportunities, create aspirational housing in those communities so that people that do well don't just up and off and further polarize those places. It really is a holistic approach to how we take the city forward. And I think what we're seeing emerging in Liverpool is a really, really strong joined up public sector, but absolutely engaged private sector in working in that way. And I think we've got a great opportunity in the coming years to do some radically different things about how we can open up opportunities for people in those poor communities. And quite often, it's only opportunity that people need, with good education, support, and a little bit of upfront investment. And we can take an awful lot of demand for public, unnecessary demand for public services away, and create the wherewithal for people to genuinely take control of their own lives. And for me, that is what real regeneration is about. And I think we're very much starting to focus on that collectively in Liverpool. And I think the potential is really exciting for the future. But the challenges, quite frankly, are absolutely bloody huge. They really are.
Thank you very much indeed, Tony. I think we're out of time. So thank you from me to all of our fantastic panelists. And I think I'm going to hand over to Stephen just to wrap up the seminar.
Thanks very much, Melanie. And that was really, really interesting. I think we're just getting to a really interesting, even more interesting part of the conversation there. We could go on for another half hour or so, definitely. So one to follow up for the future. I mean, for me, some really key words coming out there around quality and, place making and building places for people, but not forgetting about communities as well, and making sure that they are all inclusive. And I guess the other thing as well is around collaboration and partnership, and Tony touched upon that theme, and obviously that's what the MIPIM Partnership is about, is the public and private sector working closely together. And that's the whole point of, not just this series of webinars, but everything that we do throughout the 12 months that leads, hopefully, to us returning to MIPIM next year. The final thing for me to say, apart from thanking all of our panelists and to you, Melanie, for chairing these sessions so wonderfully for us, is just to, and again, Tony touched upon the fact that the city plan has been launched, but the City Region 1, which that feeds into, that recovery plan is coming out shortly soon. So we will be having Tony back on our webinar on the 24th of July, and he'll be joined by Frank Rogers, the Chief Executive of the City Region Combined Authority, to talk about the City Region coming out of lockdown. So hopefully we won't physically see you all then, but virtually see you all then. Please join us again, feed your questions through. And as I say, thank you to the panelists, to Melanie, but also to all of the viewers for tuning in today, and see you all soon. Cheers.
Goodbye.
Cheers.